Hi, Caribbean Chess Coach here again. Welcome to part 2 of my Sicilian Kan repertoire series. In this video, we will be studying the knight variation, characterized by the move 5, knight c3, where white goes for simple development. By now, we should be familiar with the Kan move order, but let's review. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4. C takes D, knight takes d4, a6. These moves have already been explained in my previous video. Knight c3, the so-called knight variation. We made the move queen c7, preparing knight f6, as the immediate knight f6 will be strongly met with the move e5. White has many tries at this point, but let's deal with the worst try first. In most Sicilian variations, the English attack is a feared weapon, but against the Kan, it is just not very effective. Bishop e3, the typical English attack move order. We play knight f6, they go f3, preventing a future knight g4 and cementing the e4 pawn. Bishop b4. We're challenging the pieces that defend the center, as our typical idea is to break with the move d5. Queen d2, and black achieves the aim with the move d5. Castling queenside. Black has many variations to punish white, one of which is the move e5. The f5 just loses a piece after bishop takes f5, e takes, and d4 forking. If they try to go bishop b3, simply defending the pawn, e5 comes again, and white is already lost here. It moves anywhere, bishop f5, e takes, and then a fork will occur on d4. White is lost. The English attack formation generally does not work well because black has in the move e6, preparing d5, unlike other typical Sicilians. Black's counterplay in the center comes very quickly. Look at some better tries for the white side. White has many piece setups they can try, one of them being bishop e2, or even bishop d3. Bishop e2, the main drawback of this line versus the bishop d3 line is that the e4 pawn, black's main source of counterplay, is not protected. Hence, black goes after the e4 pawn immediately with the move b5, intending someday to play b4 and preparing the move bishop b7, where the e4 pawn will be targeted. White's best move here is to castle. Bishop b7, and white defends the e4 pawn with bishop f3. Black plays knight c6. The knight generally goes to c6 when it can target the bishop. The move knight e5 will target the bishop on f3, which is one of the main defenders of the e4 pawn. White's best is to play knight takes c6. We'll go through other deviations later. D takes c6. Now this is a critical moment. D takes c6 is forced. All other moves give white clear advantage. Bishop takes c6 is met with a thematic sacrifice in the Sicilian. Knight d5, a very strong sacrifice. This move works as black has neglected the development of the kingside pieces, and white's aim is to keep black's king in the center of the board where it can be attacked. If e takes d, bishop b7 is not playable, rook e1, bishop e7 is met by d6. If king b8, b6 is also still strong. What happens if the queen moves? If the queen goes away, say to b6, then bishop e3 comes with tempi. If queen c8, white exploits black's stalemated king and the fact the king is exposed along the dark square. Either with the move bishop e3, intending bishop b6, or the move queen b4, intending the same queen b6 idea. If the pawn is taken, white's idea is to exploit the fact that the queen is overworked. Bishop takes b7. If queen takes on b7, then the d6 bishop hangs. Black plays bishop takes h2. The king goes to h1. If the queen now recaptures on b7, white has two pleasant choices. Either queen g4, threatening to take on g7 immediately, or at this point, just recapture the bishop on h2. Black's position is hopeless. In this position, the recaptured queen takes simply runs into either a4, undermining the queen side, or the move e5, clamping on our dark squares and exploiting the fact that the queen is on the same diagonal as white's bishop. This position is better for white. Hence, the forced recapture is d takes c6. Was up with queen e2, taking the queen off of the d file where it's exposed to attack by the black's rook with rook d8. And in some lines preparing e5, as if the knight goes to f6 immediately, then the move e5 comes. Bishop d6, developing with mp, as the h2 pawn is now targeted. g3, now the e5 square is defended. Black plays knight f6, finishing the development. White usually plays bishop g2, as generally they want to play with f4 e5, and black here plays the move e5, taking control over the f4 and d4 square. In the future, d4 may be used as a strong square for one of the black's pieces. The evaluation of this position is equal. We will see the practical examples how to play this position well. The best way to study openings is to go through the main line beginning to end and then look for deviations along the way. Starting with the deviations closest to the end first. Let's go. e4, c5, Knight f3, e6, we know all of these moves. And I'm going through the variations. Okay, so there's a deviation at this point. Instead of the move knight takes c6, white can play rook e1. Black's best is to play bishop d6, gaining a tempo with development because h2 is now under fire. g3, blocking the diagonal. And we play knight takes d4, a critical move, because we're seeking to improve our bishop on d6. We gain a tempo off of the queen, and the queen goes to d3. Our bishop is now better positioned as we're taking aim at the important knight on c3. This knight is important because it guards the d5 pawn break. Knight e7, bishop g2, intending to play f4. We simply castle, and then execute f4, we take on c3. Yes, we are giving up our important bishop, but knight on c3 is important here as it guards the d5 pawn break. We weaken their structure. d5. e5, it gains space, but it puts the pawn chain on the dark square complex, significantly reducing white's dark square's bishop. A bad bishop, good night ending may occur. The center here is closed also. Generally, in closed centers, the knight is superior. We'll see it targeting the weaknesses on the c file, bishop d2. We will look at a game example of this deviation later. Let's start from the beginning again. The student should do similar to what I'm doing, but do this on a real board, where you go through move 1 all the way through to the latest deviation. Here we saw all the main deviations after bishop f3. We should look at rook e1 and move 8. Best move is to play knight c6. If they take on c6, we must remember to recapture with the d pawn, as we do not want to get hit with the same knight d5 ideas as we discussed previously. They can play the move e5, clamping our dark squares. Intending maneuvers such as knight e4, knight d6, sinking a knight onto our weak d6 square. If they play e5, queen takes e5 is not good, as we get hit with bishop takes b5, damaging our structure and simultaneously hitting our queen. Best here is bishop b4, pinning the knight so that they cannot play the typical maneuver knight e4, knight d6. They play bishop d2, we play rook d8, pinning the bishop to the queen. If bishop d3, then we play c5. c5 opens up the scope for our bishop, and in some variations we try to play c4. If we go queen g4, we play knight e7. This pawn is untouchable as rook g8. and the g2 pawn falls. Black is winning here. The last deviation in the bishop e2 line I'm going to analyze is time of move a3. Let's go over from the top. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d, knight takes a6, a3, queen c7, bishop e2, and here we play b5. And then they go a3, preventing b4. Generally, the only thing this move does is to prevent b4 at some point. We play bishop b7, knight f6, attacking the e-pawn, and they defend with either queen d3 or bishop f3. We look at bishop f3 first. Most players here play b6, going into a hedgehog, but I prefer to move knight c6. The only difference I see between the move knight c6 in this variation and knight c6 in the other variations we analyzed thus far is that the knight on f6 potentially could be a target to the move e5. I check the engine to make sure everything is safe and knight c6 is a viable move. So here I will recommend knight c6. If they take, we must remember to play pawn takes, because if we play bishop takes, they can start to prepare the sacrifice knight d5 with the move rook e1. Let's go back. If they play queen d3, knight c6 is again playable. And if they play knight takes c6, here we have the pleasant choice of recapturing the bishop, as knight d5 is not possible. Now rook e1 is just too slow to prepare knight d5, as we will play bishop d6, gaining a tempo on h2, and then castle immediately. Let's increase our understanding of how to handle these positions by looking at some game examples of very strong players. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, we all know these starting moves. d4, c takes d, knight takes d4, a6, queen c7, bishop e2. And we said because bishop e2 does not help to defend the e4 pawn, we set our pieces to go after the e4 pawn immediately. b5, castle, bishop b7, bishop f3, and we go knight c6. Attacking the d4 knight, and then some variations, they're going to play knight e5, attacking the bishop on f3, eliminating the defender of e4. Knight takes c6 was played in this game. D takes c6, usually the best recapture, as we don't want the tricks to occur with moves like knight d5, queen e2, preparing e5. So black plays e5 themselves, blocking the e4 pawn from moving. a4, trying to undermine black's structure. And in some variations, trying to secure the d5 square for the knight. Knight f6, semi-finishing development. Rook d1, bishop e7. Black is just completing development at this stage. Bishop e3, castle, g3. So all of the pieces have been developed. There's no time for black to find some play. Here the main avenue for play is the open d file. So black takes control over the open d file. Bishop g2. Some variations preparing f4 or f3 if need be to carry the e4. Knight d7. The typical maneuver. One of the main ideas is to occupy the weak d4 square with a maneuver knight c5, the e6 to d4. This will target the c2 pawn and take a look at very critical squares. f3. This move puts the f3 pawn on like square complex, weakening the dark squares. Black goes after the dark squares with bishop c5. White plays bishop h3. e4, chasing away the knight. And queen b6, putting pressure along the dark squares. Bishop f2. Black trades white's important bishop, which guarded the dark squares, and went for this endgame. Black plays knight c5, knight d2, and rook d4, a critical move. The idea is to put pressure along the open d file. b3, doubling on the file. King e1, and black just improves his position by playing f6, putting the pawns on the right color squares, the opposite color squares of his bishop, and allowing the king to move through f7. Knight c4, king f7. This game, white played e5. And they went to e6, and it might be coming to the c3 square via the route knight c7, knight b5, knight c3, putting pressure on the d file. White hastens to lay the knight. King takes e6. And here, if we assess the position, white has a good knight, but black's bishop is also very powerful, as white's pawns are all on light squares, are juicy targets for the light square bishop. We'll see how black improves the position. Knight b2, c5, cementing the rook. Knight a4, king d6. Black first guards their position and then carries on with a concrete plan. Knight b2, f5, now striking at the structure. The idea is to weaken this line to get at the weaknesses. Rook takes d4, e takes. This creates a pawn majority on the queen side. The d pawn has no counterpart. This may be an asset long term. Knight c4, check. The king goes to c7. The e takes f5, and the bishop now takes the f3 pawn. King d2. White structure. Rook e1. Rook e8. Let's see how they continue. I played f6, attacking the structure. Black uses the tactical resource. Rook f5, king c6. Certainly protecting the bishop. Knight e5, the king moves again. Trade of pawns, but this ending, black's rook is so much better as it reaches its second rank and is able to coordinate with the bishop against c2. d3, a very brilliant move. c takes, king d4, and the king now enters. All of black's pieces are playing. Meanwhile, white has no coordination. This rook ending is objectively equal, but black was able to outplay their weaker opponent.
Here's another game example by the great Maria Mozenchuk. E4, C5, F3, E6, D4, C takes, knight takes, A6, knight C3, Queen C7, Bishop E2, and I move B5. White castles, Bishop B7, Rook E1, Knight C6. All of this we know from the theoretical section. Knight takes C6, D takes, and E5, attempted to clamp down on the dark squares and play Bishop B4. Our main move here is Bishop B4, but in this variation, Maria played the move Rook D8. You understand that Queen takes E5 is not a very good idea because Bishop B5 gives white an edge. So after the move Rook D8, gaining tempo off of the Queen, Bishop D3, C5 with the threat of C4. Maria's opponent stepped out of the pin with Queen E2. And black continued development with Knight E7. Here the move C4 was also very good, as Bishop E4, Bishop takes, Knight takes is not possible because of Queen takes E5 and Queen takes E4. The idea is to play B4 and put the knight on D5 at some point, and then just complete development Bishop E7 at castle. Black would have a very good position. But Maria played Knight E7, which is also a very good move. Bishop G5, H6, attempting to break the pin. Bishop H4, and Rook D4, gaining tempi. As we know, the majority of these lines, the D file is the main avenue of play. Bishop G3, Knight C6, just preparing Bishop E7 and putting some pressure on the E5 pawn. Maybe Knight B4 could come into consideration. Our opponent played Bishop takes B5. This sack, although quite aggressive, is not good. She simply recaptured the piece. Knight takes D5. Knight takes B5. Queen B6. And black is clearly better here. Let's see how Maria carried further position. Queen D1. Bishop E7 finishing development. C3 kicking out the knight moved to the king's side. Queen C2. Black sent the castle. Red D1. Rook A8. Hitting the hanging pawn. The A file. B3. And a brilliant move H5. Strategic lesson here. White has a bishop without a colored part. This is an opposite color bishop middle game. And white has a clear advantage on the late squares. So the immediate plan is to play H4, H3, and put pressure on the late squares. F3, H4, Bishop F2, H3, breaking down white's late square construction. Rook E4, desperately trying to blunt the diagonal. They simply took the exchange. F takes E4, Knight H4, more pressure along the late squares. Rook D7, desperately looking for counterplay. Knight G6, simply solidifying a winning position. H takes, G takes H3, Queen C6, hitting the rook and also eyeing the late squares. Knight takes E5, collecting another pawn. Knight F3, King F1, Queen A6, targeting the exposed king. Simplifying the position. And here, the white player had enough. His 2200 was easily crushed by 2400, almost 2500, Maria Mosenchuk.
This game was analyzed in the generalities of the Kan variation, but I think it's important to go over this game in this section because of the strategic weight it has. E4, C5, knight F3, E6, D4, C takes D, all normal moves. Here black played B5. Usually we played move Queen C7 here, but B5 was played. Bishop E2, Bishop B7, and we transpose back into our normal variations. Rook E1, Knight C6, King H1. Generally, white wants to play F4 and E5, making use of the space in the center. Black continues development, F4, white is able to execute their plan. Black takes on D4 to develop the kingside bishop with tempo. Queen D3, D6, guarding the E5 square. If white wants to play E5, they will have to make some concessions. Bishop F3, castle, and move E5. E5 is dubious here, as when black trades, the E-pawn is now isolated and overextended. We will see how black uses this fact to gain significant advantage. With D8, taking control of the open D file, Queen E2, Knight E5. This move is important as the knight guards D5 square, ideally where we want to put the rook, so that it could target the E5 pawn. White played Knight E4, trying to bring the pieces to the king's side and get activity on that side. Bishop E7, saving our good bishop and guarding the critical square G5. Knight F2, Rook C8, using the half open file. Bishop E4 and Knight B4, threatening the C2 pawn. C3, now the D file is somewhat weaker. The D3 square is now weak. Minor pieces are now traded. A very good strategy when your opponent has static weaknesses to go into the endgame. Knight D5 returning. A3, Knight B6. This knight is headed to C4 where it will pressure B2. White brings pieces to the king's side, but so many pieces were traded that black will be able to adequately defend on the king's side. Knight C4, pressuring B2, preventing the bishop on C1 from developing without loss of the B2 pawn. Queen G3, Rook D5, now targeting the main weakness on E5. Queen D8, taking complete control over the D file. Bishop A6, threatening Queen G7, and black easily defends with Bishop F8. Bishop G5 hitting the queen. Queen went back to C7, again targeting E5. Knight E4, with the threat of Knight F6. Black sidesteps this threat. White still continues with Knight F6, but black has calculated these variations well and just simply eats the E5 pawn. A small tactic to simplify the position, as black has a strategic advantage. Knight e5, just coming around to the king side, solidifying everything. When we're winning, you want to make sure our position is solid before you move forward. Rook e1, f5, just fixing the weaknesses. a4, Rook e3, Queen c4. Black gets their own play against white's back rank. And Queen g4, insisting that the queens come off. White has no counterplay and simply resigned. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to pass them in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any questions. If you liked the video or found it informative, do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you next time as we continue to build your Kan repertoire.